Hello world, I'm Hayley Solich, I'm your host, and this is the Gold Digger Podcast, where we're digging the dirt and finding the gold in people's lives. Grab a cuppa, sit back, relax and enjoy the show. I want to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting from Wajak Noongar Budja here in what's normally sunny Perth, but today is a bit overcast. I must say it's a bit grey over here. And I want to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Noongar people, to their elders past, present and emerging. And I want to acknowledge their connection to land, water and country. And I just love our First Nations people. I'm good friends with the elders over here, and it's just been such a wonderful experience to have conversations with them. I love conversations, and that's what today's about. So thank you for joining us. And I'm so excited to be interviewing my guest today. And she's waiting very patiently in the background here, but I'll get to that soon. First, I want to make an admission. I need today's guest probably more than anybody else, because I'm a middle-aged woman who's come through the dreaded menopause, and I've been confronted by the reality that I'm getting older. I've been wrestling with how to grow old gracefully, and I certainly don't have it down yet. So I'm really needing her attention today and to scoop up any wisdom that she may have. So in preparing for today's show, I was looking for some kind of inspirational quote that I could bring that would sort of bring us into the space. And I found this from Mark Twain, and I just loved it. He said that age is an issue of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. I loved that when I saw that. And I could hear Faith having a giggle in the background here. So she obviously likes that too. And then there was this other lovely quote that I found from Norman Vincent Peale. And he said, "Live your life and forget your age." Well, Norman, it's easier said than done when your body is screaming at you, "Hello, I'm here," and you are not as fit and healthy as you used to be. But I really appreciate the sentiment, because we can limit ourselves when we look at numbers on a page and then we have an expectation of how we're meant to be. But I am sure that Faith is going to help set that straight in our minds today. So what does this growing old gracefully really mean? And how do we attain the position of contentment with our latter years? And yet this havoc that is just reaping on our minds and our bodies, how do we come to terms with all of that? Our next guest is a woman who is confronting age head on. She's a fashionista, and I can tell you she's beautiful because I can see her even though you can't. She's a social scientist and a qualified counsellor, and she is on a mission to bring healing to women by assisting them to tackle the issues of midlife. And there are many, let me tell you. I'm fascinated to hear more about her journey and the work she's now doing. Please welcome Faith Agugu from Silver Sirens Redefining Aging. Hi, Faith.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, Hayley. Thanks for having me here.
I'm just so excited because I need you, as I said earlier, and I'm really wanting to get into that pool of wisdom that's resident within you. And I can see it when I look in your eyes, and people can't see your eyes, but I can. And I can see that there's depth there that we're going to be able to connect with today. So Faith, before we start digging around, having a more intense look at how you came to be where you are and what you're doing, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and it's just to help us get on the same page. Can you please choose an animal that best characterizes yourself and why you chose that animal?
So my one is I've chosen the octopus for many reasons. So the octopus has 500 million neurons. They're great at planning, they're flexible, and they're able to lean on past experience and past learnings, to make intelligent decisions in the future. Now, who knew that about octopus? And they love the ocean. They love being in the ocean. And if anyone who knows me knows, I start every morning about 5:30 in the morning in the ocean, no matter what time of year it is. And I prefer being under the water than above. So definitely the octopus.
That is amazing. I have never had a guest say the octopus, and I did not know that about the octopus. I love that, leaning into your past experiences to inform your decision making. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, I can feel we're going into a lovely deep place today. We're going there. We're going there. So I guess it's only fair that I should share with you the animal that I am today. I normally say the horse because that's my team animal, my spirit animal. But today I'm feeling the peacock. Except maybe not the peacock, maybe the peahen. I think I'm the peacock with all those beautiful, lovely coloured feathers, but maybe I'm the peahen who's not actually as beautiful as she used to be, or thought she was. So
I'll challenge that. I see peacock when I'm looking at you.
Thank you. Well, so today I am the peacock. I even dressed appropriately. I put on colour today because I was feeling something like that today. So, Faith, can tell us about your journey. How did you come to be doing what you're doing with Silver Sirens Redefining Aging? I think it's fascinating because I know that you have a fashion history, but I'm just curious as to how that all evolved and you came into this human services sort of space.
Okay. So for me, that journey of transitioning from the fashion industry to being an ambassador of modern aging was around me having my own midlife crisis at the age of 46. So the journey actually started off with me having a hysterectomy at 46.
Oh, wow.
And that hysterectomy catapulted me into menopause, even though I was told that it wouldn't. So I suddenly got the taste of what menopause was. And I have to say, before that moment, I hadn't thought about aging or menopause. So I was 46, and suddenly I'm in this space where I'm thrown into menopause. And then the business that I was running, a fashion business, which I'd been running for 14 years, started to fail, was starting to crumble from the GFC. So for 2008, started to really struggle, but I hung in there like everyone else. And by the time I got to about 47, 48, I could see that I couldn't hang on anymore. So I was starting to go through menopause. The business was failing and I had to close the doors. This thing that I put absolutely everything into, and I wasn't a mother. So my identity was my business.
Yes.
And I had to let that go. And that spiraled me into what I now know was a midlife crisis, which the work I do, I realized that it's actually not a midlife crisis, actually a midlife transition. But at that point, I didn't have any language for what I was experiencing. And I didn't see any other women really talking about it. So I had nowhere to go. And I was just spiraling into this space of deep depression, confusion, and a real sense of a loss, overwhelm, and a loss of identity. So I started to make sure that I could get in the pool every day for at least an hour. There's a women's pool in Coogee in Sydney.
Yes.
And I would go down to the women's pool every day and I would swim laps with friends. And I realized that I had to reinvent myself. I had to, recreate what I thought, I was up until that point was no longer viable. The woman that I was, that worked in fashion, that was happy to go out to parties because I was in PR. So I was expected to go out and party. I was struggling more and more with that. And I was trying to get my younger employees to go for me, but people wanted to see me and I wasn't enjoying it anymore.
Yes.
So I had to transition, and fashion is about youth, and I was aging out of fashion. So I had to find a career that I could age into, and I had to find a career that I would get better as I age. So when I was thinking about it, psychotherapy, you mentioned counseling, but I'm actually a psychotherapist, which is similar, but it's just a lot more qualified. I'm a bit of a snob.
Sure. Yeah.
I had a list of criteria of what I wanted the next job to be. And number one was that I would get better as I age. 2, that I could sit down, because in fashion, we were always running around and standing up. And 3, that it was well paid. By the end of my business, I was paying everybody, but not myself. So they were my 3 criteria that my next career had to be. So I went to uni and trained as a psychotherapist. And it's through that work that I was confronted, and I say confronting because it really was a confrontation, with women who were coming to see me for therapy. They were depressed, anxious, less loss of identity, the things that I had gone through before, but theirs was specific around age. So they were really depressed because of they were aging, and they were saying things like, no one looks at me, I'm now invisible, my body has changed and it's uncomfortable. No matter how hard I try, I can't make it do what I wanted to do.
Yes.
Like that. And some of them were going through menopause, some were and on the cusp of ending relationships. And there were so many things going on for them, biologically, hormonally, spiritually, and they didn't know what was going on because I'd gone through it myself. And the other layer of it was, as an African woman, my training of my role models around aging was very positive. So I didn't hold negative view around aging. So there was a combination of stuff. So suddenly I had these women in my therapy practice, and we were working through their beliefs around aging. And what I came to understand was that they had digested Western society's view of aging. I say Western because lots of other cultures do not hold the same view around aging. And the Western model is, once you lose your youth, you no longer have any value. Once you lose fertility, you're no longer able to have babies. Well, you're a woman. What's your purpose?
Yes, so that's right.
Internalize those. And that was what was causing their depressions or feelings of, isolation or invisibility.
Yeah, look, I relate to so much of what you're saying, because I think part of the menopausal journey is recognizing that your body's changing, that things are not as elastic as they used to be, that they're not, that you don't have the same level of energy that you used to have. I've always had abundance of energy because I have hemochromatosis, so my body stores iron. So I've always had an abundance of energy, and but I hit this wall when I got into menopause, and suddenly I'm tired. Suddenly my creativity, which has always been on tap, a reservoir, was empty. And my thinking, which has always been sharp, was dull. And so, there was a huge impact physically. And then going through those, the relationship change. Interestingly, the sexual relationship, and I don't mind saying this publicly, but the sexual relationship with my partner at the same time changed. It was almost like we were in sync with each other, but it had a deep impact. And so I go, what is this new space like? I'm liking the new space. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's some value. I definitely am of the positive aging in the sense of valuing wisdom and valuing that I can walk into a meeting and in 2 minutes understand what's on the table and be able to give a good solution, whereas 30 years ago, I couldn't have done that. 30 years ago, I would have been walking into the room and wondering who I'm competing with and, having that whole other conversation going on. So I think there's value in aging in the sense of your wisdom and your knowledge, but there's so much to contend with in the physiological changes that are going on in you as a woman, and certainly the impacts that has on your psyche around yourself and your value and how others perceive you. And I'm carrying a bit of weight at the moment, and recently I was like, well, would they have asked me to stand up the front if I wasn't old and carrying weight? And, it hasn't changed who I am on the inside and my ability to do things. But how's that perceived by the people that surround my life? Those thinking spaces of, am I the old grey girl now that sits in the group, that sort of sits on the outside and everyone goes, well, that's the old person in the group, And this is what, coming back to that quote about forget about your age, I think it's so relevant. I'm lucky I've got young people in my world. I've got 4 young adult children who live with me, and they keep me very young in my headspace, or else I think I would be that sitting on the outsides of the group going, I'm too old. When you was talking about, not wanting to do the night party scene to do your work, I get it, because you just can't anymore. Whereas previously you probably could have just, just walked through that and loved it and sucked up all of that attention and energy. But I think something happens in our physiologically that says now it's your time to step back a little bit and have view time. I think as a parent, you give, and I know that you don't have children, so this is not to exclude you in the conversation, Faith, but as a parent, you're giving so much out to others. And even as a worker in a career, you're giving so much out to others. I think that there is a space in this older space for you to actually have you time. and to be okay with saying, I am someone who has needs and I'm going to focus on those for a bit. I think that's I guess that's the hidden gem for me in the journey.
I see a lot of hidden gem because I still hear, even in the quote that you gave, I still hear a lot of internalized ageism because there's still an assumption that there's something wrong with it. And it's kind of like, oh, get over it. Or, there's just in the messaging, there's still the messaging about, we have to put up with it, as opposed to something distinct, which is the next phase in life. I mean, a tween does not regret moving into adolescent. An adolescent does not regret moving into adulthood. But there's a point around 35 where we suddenly switch and we're now regretting everything ahead of us, So there's a real resistance, and it's so built in us, because even what you were saying, it's so built in us that we take it for granted that that's the way we should think, that we have to somehow put a positive spin on it if we're going to consider ourselves a positive agent. But I say it's beyond that, because there's nothing negative about it anyway. That's not denying that there are physical changes that happens when the body starts to wear and tear and deteriorate. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. So it's not a Pollyanna, stance on it. But when we devalue aging and always kind of trying to justify, but I've still got some youth in me, that is still internalized ageism. That still means that you've internalized the negative thing. So what I want people to understand is it's a natural part, and it's a natural progression as a human. If we are lucky to still be alive, if we're lucky to die of old age, this is a normal phase. Like every other phases we've gone through, this is one of them. And somehow in our society, we're told to resist it or stave it off or defy it, anti-aging, do all that some way. And that's what I fight against. It's like, come on. It's a natural phase of life. And if we can accept that, I believe there's a lot more to gain from it. There's a lot more gifts it gives us than the challenges. And that's the invitation, is for us to look at that.
Look, I love that. I love that. I'm hearing what you're saying, because what you're saying to me is, this is not about you're old, but you're going to still be young. Yeah. Even though you're old, you can still do young things. You can dress young. You can act young. And I'll give you an example of that. Middle age, I separated from my partner for a little bit of time. And so I was with my kids and we went down to the beach. And so I decided that I was going to roll down the hill like a little kid. And I did, but I didn't account for me not being the little child I was in a little child's body, but being a bigger, heavier woman. And I rolled down the hill, but I got so much momentum, I winded myself. And so that I did that because I wanted to feel young and free again. But I don't need to do that. Is the message that I think I'm getting from you, is that you don't need to you can if you want to, but you don't need to be expressing the youthful thinking space in ways that are unhelpful to you, I guess is probably the right way, because that was really unhelpful to me to roll down that hill. I was just a spectacle. Do you know what I'm saying?
And exuberance doesn't have to be limited to youth. There's a way for us to be exuberant in a way in our bodies at the version that we are in. I'm a 58-year-old woman and I can do exuberance that is comfortable in my body without trying to do the 20-year-old version of exuberance, you know?
Yes, that's a beautiful way to summate what I was trying to say. Yeah, yeah. I think that the challenges for me that I've had in my headspace are around who am I, what am I about, how do I still have an impact in the world, because the doors feel like they're closing. They're the kind of mental questions that have been playing in my head. How can I still have an impact even though situations may be, shifting and changing for me? Because I grew up sitting at the table with my grandparents and being surrounded by the wisdom of elders in my life. But I don't see that as being as encouraged now in our community as it should be. it used to be in our family with my husband's family, because they're all over here and mine aren't. It was, you don't ring, you don't come round, was that's the funny phrase we use. You know, ring, you know, come round, you know, because that's what we always heard from the elders, because they didn't connect with their elder group.
Yes.
So I think that's the shift I think we need.
Yeah, well, I'm privileged to come from a culture that respects that. So there's a beautiful African proverb that says, when an old person dies, a library dies with them.
Yes.
So in that, we can teach people to absolutely value and appreciate the wisdom of the ones that have gone before us. You know, and I think that's something that we've lost. And that's why older people tend to be scrambling for relevance. And I see this and I hear this a lot. You know, we're not relevant anymore. And part of it for me, and that's just me as a therapist head, sounds narcissistic, you know, because there is always going to be spotlights on particular age group, and we all move through that. So let's say in our societies, 18 to 35. So that's the age group that seems to have relevance and power and, you know, dictate the trends, etc. Okay, so we'll move through that, and I don't understand this kind of like desperation to kind of hold on when our time has moved through. So I'm really happy to step aside for younger women to have the spotlight. I don't have to worry about or obsess about being relevant. Relevance means something very different in my 20s and my 30s. And right now, I want to take my space as the elder and as the crone very proudly.
Yes.
You know, and that role is a very powerful role. I might have wrinkles and I might not look as beautiful as my 20s and 30s, but that's okay. I've been there. I don't have to try to hold on, but I can step into my role now, you know, and that is to help elevate the women that are coming. And I want a strong message to the women in their 20s and 30s that when they get to this spot, it's a powerful and dynamic time. They don't have to waste their energy dreading and fearing it, and they can just enjoy their 20s and 30s, you know. And I think as elders, as we step into that, that's our role. So I think when we are worried about relevance as it pertains to being young and trendy and, you know, I think we need to just be happy to move away from that and step into our real power, you know, which is as elders.
Yeah, and look, I'm hearing you, and I that is really, you know, resonating with my heart. I think that there's a lot of confusion in our youth, in our young people, and they just they don't even know it, but they are screaming out for support and for guidance. And although, you know, a lot of guidance is coming via TV shows and the internet, it's not necessarily the guidance that's going to help them be successful in their own journeys. Yeah. And so I think that we do definitely have a real role to play. And certainly I'm engaged with my kids and their life and their friends, and they love me, which is awesome. I got told this week, all my friends love you, Mum. You know, so I'm not worried about that part of relevance. I think it's just it's knowing the phase of life you're in and embracing that. And I loved what you said about the crone phase. I think the crone phase is such a special phase of life. I honestly do think that. And I thought coming into the, you know, in your 40s to 50s, you kind of fly really high. That's like peak performance time for me. That was the peak performance. That's when I had real mental clarity and I was kicking goals and I knew my stuff. And then coming into the 50s, I kind of felt like a beached whale for a bit there, you know. I've landed somewhere. I'm not sure this is where I'm meant to be. I don't feel like my environment doesn't feel the same, and so it's transition. Yeah. Definitely transition time.
Yeah, it's transition, and it is for most of us an existential crisis, and it is a kind of an emotional inventory of our lives. And I think that's a natural thing to go through is for us to stop and assess all of the decisions I've made up to now. Do they serve me still? Most of them will serve me then, because my focus was around creating a life that I can bring my children up, look after us all, have the finances. Those were my sets of criteria for most of us. But when we get to this transition now, it's about legacy. It's about purpose. It's about doing work that really sinks to our heart and aligns with our values. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful time. I cannot stress that enough, as I move into it. I love it. It's the best. But I went through my existential crisis, and I was at that gateway of, what's ahead of me? So it's a very natural phase that we go through.
I'm curious. I've done a lot of work in the sexual health space and gynecology with an awareness campaigner. One of the things that was said to us around hysterectomy was this was a lady shared about her parent who had a hysterectomy. She was an artist and she lost her creativity. I was just curious, did you have any reduction in creativity post hysterectomy?
Gosh, not one little bit. What concerned me, the fear that I had before I had my hysterectomy, and the reason why I put it off for so long, because I had the worst fibroids, most painful periods for at least a decade. I should have done this years ago, like at least 7 years before I did it. But what stopped me from doing it was because I thought I would lose my femininity, my womanhood in some ways.
Yes.
Like, if I don't have a uterus, then I'm not a woman.
Yes.
There was this thing that I was, and I didn't share it with anybody, but it was just this inner fear that I had. So I kept putting it off, and I can tell you, it was the opposite feeling, because the last 10 years of having those horrible periods had taken away my sexuality, had taken away my sensuality. I was very uncomfortable and insecure, self-conscious about having sex, because I didn't know where I was going to just bleed, and really, really hemorrhaging. It was horrible. So, but after the hysterectomy, there was this new freedom that came through me, and I feel so much more comfortable and confident sexually than I've ever done in my life, for sure.
Amazing.
And part of that is age, and part of that is definitely the hysterectomy.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Look, I'm really, really grateful to hear that, because I know when I was told that story, I thought, wow, I wondered about the connection. Is there a connection? But obviously there's not. It must have been purely for that individual.
Quite a few friends have also gone through it, because after I went through, quite a few of my friends said, I've been putting off as well. And we all have the same view. It's like, why didn't we do it before?
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So can you just give us a little picture of what has been your greatest joy in your journey? I know that you've had some hard things to get through, obviously, with fibroids. Fibroids are painful. So and the not having children, I had to go through a really difficult process of reconciling, coming to peace with that. That was probably one of the hardest things I ever went through. But I know your question is about the joy. Sorry. You talk about that if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I think it's really significant, because I think there will be women listening who are past the childbearing age, and a lot of women do say to me, do you ever come to peace with that, with not being a mother? And I tried all the way up to the age of 45. I didn't have relationships that were conducive to bringing in a child. I didn't, but I was so desperate that I was able to. I was willing to turn, shove the round peg into the square hole. I was just willing to make the relationship work, because I wanted to have a child so much, But I was 45, and I'd been to IVF, was told that I had a couple of eggs left. My then partner also went to IVF after much bullying and cajoling from me. He eventually agreed to. And then, we'd done all the prep. And then I just had this light bulb moment that just went, when my child, if I got pregnant at 45, say I have a baby at 46, when my child is a teenager, I will be in my 60s. I will not have as much energy. I did not believe, and I know other people can, but for me, I did not believe I would have the energy, the patience, the tolerance to be able to give my child the very best. And it was just like a very clear decision. And I just made the decision in that moment that no, this was not meant for me. And no matter how painful it was, I was going to let go. So I did let go. And it was a easy decision to come to on a cerebral level, but on an emotional level, it was a very dark place I went to. I was very depressed for a number of years around really letting go and stepping away from that. And I had to do quite a bit of work in therapy on that, but I'm really happy to say, 12 years down the line, I feel such gratitude for the life that I have, because I do accept that not everyone is meant to be a mother, and the motherhood is so much more than just in physically birthing humans.
Yes,
I get to do motherhood in my work. I mean, most of my clients are the age that I actually had one termination, but most of my clients are the age that my daughter, and I say a daughter because I feel like I know it was a daughter, she would have been, if I had followed through with the pregnancy. So for me, motherhood looks very broad, and
absolutely.
I feel like a very maternal person. I'm the person that feeds everyone. Come over, and, so I really feel like I would have been a great mother. But I feel like the universe had other plans for me, not to compare myself to Oprah, but I really relate when Oprah's, as a child-free woman, she talks about that, there was other things that the universe had plans for her, other ways for her to serve. And I feel like that. I feel that I'm much more in service in a broader way because I'm not a mum.
Yeah, no, look, as a mum of 4 who has had it's been a tough ride, let me tell you. I often envy my friends who don't have children. So I think, oh my goodness, where would my life have gone if I had not had, this joy and this limitation? Let's be real honest about it. There's a joy that's associated with having children. They kill your selfishness, so they make you a better person. But there's also the burden of family is a huge thing. I'm living here I am in my late 50s, and I'm living with my adult children who've moved out and moved home, and this is symptomatic for women that and husbands as well, but it's symptomatic that once you have children, they are for life, and good and bad, you are married to whatever that looks like for life, unless you opt out, and some women do. So I think that there's pluses and minuses on both counts, let me tell you.
And to answer your question around the joy, freedom for me is one of my biggest value. And so the joy of not being a mum is that I have so much freedom.
Yes.
I love the ability to be able to just get up and go. And that's such a big thing for me. I can make decisions at a whim. Not that I'm that type of person, but I've had so much choices, And I just absolutely value that. So when I went through my process of grief, what I landed on was, wow, you can do anything you want.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Your money is yours.
Yeah. Yes. And you just don't have that when you're a parent, let me tell you.
I know that.
Sacrifice everything all the time.
I feel the gratitude.
But then it's a choice to sacrifice too, if you want to own your stuff.
Yeah. Look, you know what? The bottom line is, like you said, both have their strengths and weaknesses, both have their advantages and disadvantages, both do. And it simply is. And if I would turn down the clock, I would choose to be a mother, but it's accepting the things as they are. Yeah. As they are, I choose to enjoy the advantages of being a child-free woman. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We're going to just take a quick break, Faith, and then we'll be back in just a moment.
Voices going round in my head. I don't believe them. Don't believe what they said. But the light is calling. It's calling. Someone help me to find my way.
Gold Digger podcast, and I'm Hayley Solich, and we're speaking today with Faith Agugu. Faith, it's been lovely having this conversation, this rich conversation about aging gracefully, and I love your perspectives. And I'd just like to understand a bit more about what your core messages are in the work that you're doing with women. So would you like to just sort of share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just want to just a quick correction around aging gracefully. I just want to say that women or anyone, you're entitled to age disgracefully if that's what you want. Again, I really hate women being pigeonholed into a particular type of age. And I think one of the core messages in Silver Sirens is that women age on their own terms, and that's really important to me. But my core message generally around as a psychotherapist, and I drum this into my clients, and it's a tagline on the Healing Process website, which is my therapy practice, is that by doing our individual healing work, we heal our families, our relationships, and our community. And I say that because I think that we can kind of think that other people are the problem and they should do the healing. And quite often I have clients come to me and say, my partner needs to go therapy. And I just go, no, everything begins with us. If we all individually take responsibility for our healing or growth journey, there will be change in our relationships and families and communities. That's a given, So yes. I think at the core it's about taking responsibility for the journey.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I 100% agree. While you're looking out, you're missing what's going on in here, in us.
That one finger pointing out, three pointing back. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely true. And certainly that's been my experience in my relationship with my partner. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yeah.
And if we understand our own journey, then we can be understood by others as well. So what kind of reactions are you getting to your programs, Faith? What sort of, I'm just curious how women presenting to you and how the work you're doing is changing their experience.
And we're talking specifically around aging, I'm assuming. Or
yes,
just,
yeah.
So the women that are involved with Silver Sirens, I can just sum it up in 3 words, and that's relief. One, relief that there's a community of women that understand them, excitement, that, the strong message is that, oh my God, potentially the best is yet to come, it's not necessarily the message of this is over. Potentially the best years of my life could be ahead of me, and the last one is hope, which ties in with number 2, and I think that's a strong feedback that I get. They come to the events and they say, I now have hope that the next 20 or 30 years I can actually live the life of my dreams, and I can actually follow through with my passions and really live my legacy, live my purpose. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful hope for women to have.
Yeah, and I do. Look, I think that having come through postnatal depression at one point in my life and the despair that sits around that, I can really see shifting the lens of the long term is such an important part of the recovery of yourself as an individual and your resilience, etc. So being able to connect with a vision of who you might be and how your life experiences might have value in this next part is huge. That's one reason why I started the Inspiring Legacy Project, which is about encouraging women to be part of legacy. So not going to the grave, like you were talking earlier about that African proverb around taking, the library to the grave with you. I also think about that often. I lost my 2 grandparents, my 2 grandmothers and my mother in the same year. And so all of the information in our family in the matriarchal line was gone in a 12-month period. So for me, capturing the wisdom, capturing the understanding of how to do things, the knowledge of family systems, all of that stuff was so incredibly important and overlooked by a lot of people. So, I really wanted to encourage women to look around in their world and go, well, how could I be part of something, creating something that's going to go beyond me, that's going to have impact? And so I see what you're doing here is like, that's amazing. To me, this totally encapsulates what I'm trying to encourage women to do, which is to have a look in their world see what they have in their life experience bag that could have value to others. And what I'm hearing from you, Faith, is you had this experience, it changed your life, and you looked at this experience and gone, well, how can I take the gold out of this and take it forward and make it valuable for the future and for others? And that's to your credit. Hats off to you, Faith, for doing that. And
wow, graciously.
And for the impact for other women, to bring hope and to transform their thinking around what can be very bleak for some women. This can be a very bleak time. We have a population of women that are homeless like never before. Women who are
fastest growing cohort in homelessness. That's one of the charities that we support. It's the Older Women's Work by a Brick program, because women over 50 are the fastest growing cohort in homelessness. It's crazy.
Yeah. So there's also, because we have this women empowerment, women are not staying where they're not happy anymore. They want more for their lives. So there's a lot of transition and I guess growth for women, but also challenge for women as they're coming into this part of life. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. So I'm loving what you're doing. Keep doing it.
And there's more to be done.
So if you could change one thing right now, putting on your wisdom mantle as a crone, if you could change one thing right now about how we are as a society, what would that be?
I would change two, because I'm greedy. Okay. Number one, I would change the aged care system. It's heartbreaking. It actually breaks my heart to think of us as we're aging, that the only options that are open to us is the system that focuses more on profit than care. That absolutely breaks my heart. So I would change the aged care system. I would introduce more multi-generational type living situation that we see in more traditional communities. I know it's easier said than done, but I think we can do much better than what we've got today. And number two, I would change the childcare systems. There are a lot of women like myself, child-free, or maybe other women who now the children have gone, that have got the time, and younger women are struggling, especially single women are struggling to pay for childcare and to find support. We need a village to grow, to nurture children. Yes. And I would really urge for some changes in that area. I would love to see a dial-a granny type program, which is something I'm thinking about, where someone like me can put my name down and be respite for younger, single mothers or younger. Yeah, that's what I do things.
Yeah, and look, you're speaking my language now, because what I have such a heart for young mothers, because I was a young mother who needed support, and I had a few people who were wonderful. I had an older lady who used to come in fortnightly and clean my house. And she just did that out of the kindness of her heart, and she was consistent through that time when I was at my lowest. And I am so grateful to her. But a lot of my decisions made were based on finances, and so that kept me out of the workplace for a long time. They had 4 little children, and what a difference it would have been if I had had family around me. I had no family, or if I had a grandmother that I could drop the kids to, or if I could had a friend who could come and sit in for a time, an older friend in the community. There's considerations you'd have to have around safety and security, but we are a community. And one of the things I'm passionate about is reconnecting community.
Absolutely.
All levels of community. And in particular, I'm passionate about reconnecting the female community, because I think there's wisdom that sits in our older generations, and there's young people who are lacking wisdom, who really need it. And we need to spend time together and get off the phones, get off the computers, get into the real world and share what we know, cook together, plant together in the garden, see things together and share what we're seeing, because they come through different lenses, have rich conversations together. I think there's a lot that could be done. Yeah.
Look, the antidote for addiction, and addiction is really, it's a spiritual malady, it's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And the antidote for addiction is connection, and that's why we desperately need to do exactly what you're saying, rebuild communities. That would change a lot of the mental health and addiction problems we have in our societies today.
I absolutely 100% agree. And I think, Faith, we might leave it there because I think that is a key message. Oh, you got one more thing to say? Sorry, I was going to say, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
I just wanted to end with this beautiful quote. It's a Native American quote, and it says, "At puberty, a woman is shown her power. Through menstruation, she exercises her power. And at menopause, she becomes her power."
I love that. I absolutely do love that. So I'm powerful today. Woohoo!
Yay!
Look, Faith, thank you so much for having this conversation. It's challenged me to have a think and to reframe. And I think that's a really important thing to do. And so I'm hoping that if there's any women out there that have listened today and you're inspired by the work Faith's doing, what website should they go to connect with you, Faith?
Come to www.silversirens.org.
Silversirens.org. Now, that's not too hard to forget if you go to your Grays, silversirens.org. Fantastic. And look, you might see me, Faith. I might be heading your way because I think that you might have some answers to some questions that I have, going on in the inside of me.
Great. Or join us for the healing. Our next Redefining Aging event is on Saturday, the 16th of September. It's in person in Sydney and online as well. And that's
fantastic.
Saturday, the 16th of September. And yes, beautiful day. And the theme this year is Never Too Late. We've got some amazing speakers sharing about their journey of Never Too Late, including the beautiful author Jane Caro.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I've written it down. It's going in my diary. Awesome. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Faith. I really appreciate your time and all the best for what you do in the future with Silver Sirens.
Thank you.
Hi, you've been listening to the Gold Digger podcast. I'm Hayley Solich, your host, and we've been speaking to Faith Agugu from Silver Sirens Redefining Aging. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please consider liking, sharing, or following us, and we'll be back again with the next episode. Thank you.